at the end of the day, every aspiring hegemon wants to be the only one. There are no shared hegemonies. Now, look, as you said, the Iranians are down, but they're not out. They're sitting. They've sort of retreated back into Iraq, and they're not there for sort of like, okay, they haven't accepted that reality. For them, a Sunni regime on their western flank is unacceptable. So it's in their interest to continue to make sure that this regime does not stabilize. So, and then of course there is the historic Persian and Turkish, rivalry that has to play itself out. From a Turkish point of view, Iraq, with the Kurds and the Sunnis, somehow also should come under Turkish influence. The Iranians know that if they do not project influence, then their position in Iraq becomes vulnerable. And so that situation has to play itself out. Then can, Saudi Arabia and Turkey work with each other? I mean, historically, it was the Saudis, the forefathers of the current regime in Saudi Arabia, that were the first to rebel against the Ottoman Empire in the mid-18th century in the Arab world, and the founding of the Saudi polity back in the 1740s. So Turkey has to somehow find a modus vivendi with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has its firepower is massive financial muscle, but it's not a military power. Turkey, on the other hand, is an industrialized power. It's part of NATO. It has a serious military force, although it has financial problems. So can they work something out with each other to manage Syria? And then, of course, what happens in the broader region? The Saudis and the Turks have an interest in making sure the Iran does not have a revival in the region. The Saudis, the Turks have diplomatic relations for decades with Israel, although relations under the Erdogan government have really soured between the two countries. But nonetheless, there is that relationship. The Saudis have to sort out the relationship with Israel, not because America is asking for it, is because the United States is saying, you deal with Gaza. This is your problem. You've relied on us here in Washington to provide for a two-state solution. We were not able to do it, and we're unlikely to succeed in the future. This is yours. This is a new America where we are retrenching. We are not going to do the heavy lifting in any part of the world in terms of security. We want the regional stakeholders, ideally our allies and partners, to take the lead on that. You are our main ally, and we would like you to take a lead on this, which means you must engage with Israel and figure it out. And this isn't going to be figured out in the short term. Turkey sees that and says, well, I'm a great power, and this is my southern flank. I need to be able to have an input into what happens to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And so can they work with Saudi? To what extent? These are all questions that remain unanswered. I don't think the Turks know themselves what they will do, or even the Saudis. So we have what is a very complex quadrangular dynamic in the region with those four powers: Turkey, Israel, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. And that will shape the region. Their interplay will shape the region for years, if not decades, to come.
That Saudi-Turkey relationship is very interesting now, isn't it? Particularly given what you say, Kamran, about the US wanting to pull back more. But obviously, they've got the history there in the history of the fall of the Ottoman Empire. But at the same time, they do have what seems to an outsider like significant crossover in terms of their interests. They're both Sunni powers. They don't like Iran. They are, of course, large, but they're not, sort of in many ways at other ends of the Middle East to each other. What's to stop them being friends and actually saying, let's between the two of us, sort some of these issues out? Or is this in many ways just sort of classic great power politics, where they've each got their interests and they're kind of trying to project those interests themselves, and that means they're not really willing to work together?
Great question. So first of all, history, ethnicity. Yes, they're Sunni, but even at that religious level, there are different, if you will, trends, ideological trends. So the current government in Turkey comes from an Islamist tradition, which has been historically an enemy of the Saudis. The Saudis come from sort of the Wahhabi Salafi tradition of Islam. So both are Islamic, if you will, polities, but very different from each other. They have sort of competing ideas on how that religious identity shapes geopolitics and politics. And then ethnicity is writ large. What was one of the reasons for the rebellion on the part of the Saudis and the Wahhabis in the 1700s against the Ottoman Empire? And that was that we Arabs living in Arabia, the home of the Prophet, we have Mecca and Medina in our territory, and we should be the leaders of this of the broader mid-region and the broader Islamic world. Not Turkey. They're Turks. They came from Central Asia, and they are, we are the sort of the true, the original Muslims, if you will. Well, 250 years have passed since, and the Saudi polity has emerged. For the longest time, it consolidated itself on those principles. Now, under current Crown Prince, soon to be King Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, religion has taken a back seat. It used to be one of the three pillars of the Saudi polity: religion, tribalism, and oil. And religion, I think that there's something to be said about the ability of the current Crown Prince to sort of minimize the role of one of those pillars and maintain stability in the kingdom, which is something that's sort of understated and under-discussed. But it's fascinating from my point of view. So there is space. So religion isn't sort of that competing thing. You look at the AKP, it's also sort of post-Islamist. It's not the AKP is not the Islamist group that it was when it emerged after the 2002 elections. A lot of changes have taken place. So can these evolutions in both spaces allow for the two polities to work together? I think yes. Then there are material interests, which reign supreme any day. The Turks, while being a very powerful military, do not have the financial bandwidth that the Saudis have. So that gives the Saudis, if you will, some degree of parity in a potential relationship. That we bring money to the table, you bring your military wherewithal, and can we reach an understanding? So I'm saying that it is possible, but there are these many other variables that have to be sort of dealt with, and at the end of the day, every aspiring hegemon wants to be the only one. There are no shared hegemonies.